Hello, Tiffani Cappello here with A Transformed Life. And today I want to talk to you about anxiety you might be experiencing after you've had a loss or when you are grieving. Now, first of all, I wanted to say to you, if you've lost someone or something, I am so very sorry. My heart really goes out to you. My oldest daughter would be 32 years old. She would have turned 32 in September. It is now November of 2024. And she was born with 15 congenital heart defects. It was absolutely devastating to me. She only lived 15 days. And when I lost her, I thought my whole world had ended. I just felt like I couldn't even go on. She was my first child, and not only was I grieving the loss of my daughter, I was also grieving the loss of a dream, because I had a really bad childhood. In those early years, I didn't have a nurturing mother because my mom was a drug addict. And so I wanted to become that nurturing mother. I couldn't do anything about what happened back in my past, but I just wanted to experience that loving family. And so I had a double grief when I lost my daughter, because I was so anxiously awaiting the birth of that child so I could have that loving family. And boom, I was devastated with this loss. So I know what it's like to go through loss. I don't pretend like I know exactly what you're going through. And I also don't want to devalue your loss or grief if it's not the death of someone you're grieving, but you're grieving the loss of a job or your health or your home or a dream that you've had your whole life that you now realize you're going to have to set that aside for one reason or another. Okay, there are many different ways we could grieve. There's many different things we can grieve over. Okay, and a lot of times after we go through this a loss and we enter into this grieving experience, we begin to feel anxious because this is new territory. This is unfamiliar. Maybe you've had this dream your whole life and now you realize it's not going to be a reality. And now you find yourself thinking about, how am I going to now navigate another vision for my life? Maybe you've lost a pet. Maybe you lost your best friend. Maybe you've had a breakup with your boyfriend. These are all losses, and we go through the grieving process, and some anxiety is part of that. Now, here's what happens in our modern society, and this is so sad, but modern clinicians have a tendency to pathologize the grieving process and make it into a mental illness. Okay, this happens so often. I see people coming to me for coaching or hypnosis. They've had a grief experience, and then they tell me how, well, because my loved one died, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. I was diagnosed with chronic anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder. Sometimes even worse, I was put on these meds that I now can't get off of. This really breaks my heart, okay, because there is a normal grieving process, and some anxiety and depression is a normal part of that. And I just beg you, don't let anyone pathologize that. Now, I'm not saying that mentally ill people don't grieve and have that mental illness recognized during that grieving process, but I don't think that's the norm. When I lost my daughter, I went to a psychologist who wanted me to go and visit a psychiatrist. She was concerned that perhaps I would need meds because I was double grieving, and my trauma was affecting and triggering my current experience. And so many of you know what that's like. And so I was taking it really hard. This was a huge loss. It would be a loss for anyone, and maybe it was a bigger loss for me. I don't know. However, I went to see this psychiatrist, and he said to me, I think that you have been depressed your whole life, and this current experience of depression is just compounding it. Thought about it, And I thought, I don't recall being depressed my whole life. He goes, well, I'm the expert. And I think that you have a lifelong clinical depression and you're going to need meds. Now, thank goodness I was self-aware to recognize that I didn't believe that to be the case. I had studied the grieving process. I knew what I was going through was normal and to be expected. And I knew that there was a path out of that at some point, even if I felt like I was drowning at the time. And I said to him, I don't understand. Isn't this the normal grief process? Depression is part of that. And he looked at me, and I kid you not, I'm not making this up. He said, honey, these medications are so good that I think every American should be on them. And I looked at him and went, oh, just say no to drugs, eh? Of course, that did not go over well. He was pretty angry at that. But I was angry. I was going through something normal, and he was painting me out to be mentally ill. Now, I know from seeing so many clients over the past number of years that this is not an uncommon experience. And as I'm thinking about this morning, I wanted to make this video to help you understand that going through a loss, going through grief, and experiencing some anxiety, some depression is a normal part of the process. And you don't need to think like you're losing your mind, you're going mentally ill, you're going crazy. Feeling like that is part of the process. And so many people come to that conclusion, and they end up either diagnosing themselves or allowing someone else to diagnose them with a mental illness. And I'm just praying that is not you. So how do you know when your anxiety has crossed the line and it's becoming pathological and you need help? Okay. That is when that anxiety or that depression becomes completely debilitating. Now, that's difficult to discern when you're in grief, because in those early stages, you do feel completely debilitated. When my daughter died, I was so devastated. I just didn't even want to get out of bed. I didn't want to eat. I think I lost some weight. It was difficult for me to figure out what to do. I had planned on being a stay-at-home mom, and I had given up a business I was running at the time to stay home. I handed it over to a single mom. I wasn't going to take it back. She was now had a viable way to earn income to support her children. How dare me take that back? So now I was left without a business, not knowing where to go next. I felt like I lost everything. And so understandably, that took some time to adjust to. But as time goes on, if you're not recovering, you're still not getting out of bed, you're not able to work, your relationships are falling apart, you're starting to get stress-related illnesses, yes, please get help. Now, what kind of help is useful depends on you, okay? Everybody's different. But I loved my group support. I joined Compassion International, which is a support group for people that lost children. And there's many other kinds of support groups like that. Now, here's a reason that is so important. If you're going through loss and grief, when you get in one of these support groups, you begin to realize this is a common experience. I feel like I'm going crazy, you say. And everybody goes, yeah, I felt like that. Or I feel like that now. I just don't know how I can face life. I feel like I'm never going to recover. Yeah, I'm going through that too. And you realize, well, everybody here can't be mentally ill. This is the normal grief process. Now, in our modern society, we've lost touch with grief, because 300 years ago, losing a child, losing a friend, a parent at a young age, a spouse, losing your health, all these things were so common that you were aware of the fact that the grief process was normal, and you had watched enough people go through it that you wouldn't be sold the lie that you're mentally ill because you're going through grief. But, when I lost my child, it was in the 90s, the early 90s. There were 8 women in my church pregnant. I'm the only one that loses a child. And then I got to go to church on Sunday and see everyone with their babies. I got to go to the grocery store, see everyone with their babies. You may feel the same if you've lost a spouse and you look around and your friends still have their spouses, or a dog, or a relationship, anything. You look around you and everyone else Their life's going on and yours seems to have stopped. So it's a devastating experience to go through. But when you find a group of people who understand that, it is a total game changer. You need that support, and I really encourage you to find that if at all possible. Now, there's nothing wrong also with finding a good therapist, but I will make a suggestion here. Okay. The reason why I'm super good at helping people recover from panic and anxiety is because I have been there. I had debilitating daily panic attacks. I was completely debilitated with anxiety to the point where I couldn't leave my house. And because I know what it's like to be inside the mind of someone struggling with a severe anxiety disorder, and I found my way out, I'm able to reach back and help other people get out. Okay. So when you find a therapist who understands the grief process, and better yet, find someone who also has gone through grief. They know what to expect. Someone who's completely unfamiliar may just assume that and diagnose you with depression or anxiety because some of the thinking that you're experiencing, some of your behaviors are indicative of that. They don't recognize it as a normal part of the grief process. Now, that's a shame. They should be better educated, but it's unfortunately what's happening. And it seems like with every decade, there's more and more clinicians diagnosing pathology in normal people having normal struggles and normal experiences. Don't be one of those people. There are good people out there. I'm happy to help anyone who needs help navigating that process. So if you're going through grief and loss, remember, you're going to make it. Okay. I know you don't feel like you're going to make it now, but trust me, you can. So I lost my daughter 32 years ago. I never thought I'd be happy again. I didn't want to get up and face the day. But now, fast forward 32 years later, and my life is filled with joy and peace and happiness. I can tell you, you can make it. And I know that you can get past this. So I just want to encourage you to hang in there, excuse me, getting tongue tied again. Hang in there because you can get through this. I want you to think back right now of all the experiences you've had in the past that you thought you couldn't make it through. And here you are today. Okay. You are stronger than you think. And take a look at your thinking right now. If you're thinking and meditating on the following: I'm not going to make it. I can't stand this. I'm not going to survive. I can't make it without so and so. I'm never going to be happy again. If this is how your thought processes are, you're going to experience a greater level of depression and anxiety. So it's good to sometimes just sit down with a piece of paper and write down what are the repetitive patterns of thought I'm having. And then ask yourself, if I continue to think this way, what's my experience going to be? And then write down what you need to be thinking in order to get past that. You know, this is tough, but I'm going to make it. I can be happy again. Think about the other people in your life who've actually been able to move past grief and find peace and happiness again. And one of the things I did when I was grieving that was so pivotal to me moving through that and coming out the other side is I actually read books and studied people who had gone through horrible losses. And one of my main focuses was the Jewish Holocaust. Okay, so many people in the Jewish Holocaust lost their entire family. They lost their children, their mother, their father, their spouse. Some of them watched their children murdered right before their own eyes. It was such a horrible experience, incredibly sad. And so as I would read these stories, I wasn't trying to further depress myself. What it actually did for me was made me realize that human beings are so incredibly resilient. And if someone could face that kind of tragedy, loss, and suffering, and they could come through on the other side, I could do it. Because my loss in my own mind wasn't as great as that, because watching your own child harmed to me was worse in my mind. That would be more devastating. So I was able to gain hope by listening to stories of people who've had incredible struggles. And there are so many stories, there's videos, there's books. I really encourage you to encourage yourself every day. Every day, infuse some hope, whether it's talking to a friend who's compassionate, whether it's seeing a professional, or whether it's reading or listening to someone who's made it through and they're reaching back and helping you to find your way out of the darkness. So I hope this is helpful. Don't let anyone pathologize your loss, your grief, and know that you can find your way out. And I love you, and I'll see you in the next video.